Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to all of our employees, partners, and customers to today's office hours. My name is Philippa Lamberton and I'm the ACH lead for the Advanced Competence team. For anyone who hasn't attended an office hours before, these are sessions designed to be open discussions with IFS leadership, where employees, customers, and partners can ask questions, lasting 30 to 50 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. Today, we are joined by Tony Johnson, IFS Cloud Program Director, and Nalin Badagama, Director of Product Management. Please post your questions in the chat section and we'll hold the Q&A until the end of the presentation. Over to you, Tony.
Thanks very much, Phil, and welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Today, Nalin and I are going to talk to you about the IFS Cloud, the product which was launched in March this year, and also about the Lifecycle experience portal, which is a key part of the cloud product. So as Phil said, my name is Tony Johnson. For those I haven't met before, I'm a program director at IFS. I'm working closely with R&D to launch the latest and greatest IFS Cloud product offering. You know, we have a lot of customers on that journey already, but today is a time where we're going to introduce the rest of you to what that IFS Cloud journey is like. So what you can expect, what you might have some concerns about. If you've got questions, do ask them. It's a forum where we're here to answer your questions. If we don't have the answer, then of course we will take your questions and come back to you. So firstly, what is IFS Cloud? Because it can be a little bit misleading, because the IFS Cloud name refers to both the IFS Cloud product and the IFS Cloud service, and also the IFS Cloud Buildbased. So all these things are under, if you like, umbrella of IFS Cloud, which can give some confusion to some customers. The IFS product is the next generation, next evolution of IFS apps, okay? But it's different in many ways than those apps versions which came before. Okay, it's the biggest product launch in IFS history, which sees us merging lots of functionality from service management into a single unified platform with ERP. So our roadmap for the future is published, it's clear, and really we have a product here designed to run on the cloud, but that doesn't mean it's only to run in the cloud. So you can run the IFS Cloud in different models, and we're going to cover a little bit about that today if you want to continue to run it on premise. So you've probably heard a lot about containerization. It's a hot topic in the industry, and it brings a rapid advancement in sort of architecture, and all the buzzwords like Docker, Kubernetes. Everyone's heard these in the industry, but what really does it mean for you? Well, actually, for an IFS Cloud customer who's operating the IFS Cloud system, not really very much. It means we're able to leapfrog the kind of multi-tenancy concept and bring better elasticity and without functional compromise. But from a day-to-day application point of view, it doesn't really mean very much at all, particularly because the way that we've managed the deployment of IFS Cloud means that you don't have to necessarily have the skill sets of Docker and Kubernetes in your teams in order to operate and manage the IFS Cloud product. So we've got two fundamental ways to deliver IFS Cloud application. And the first is cloud service, where we offer a sort of cloud service alongside the IFS Cloud product, where IFS takes care of everything. And one of the key benefits here is the automated deployment of change between the Cloud Buildbased and the Cloud Usebased. The second is a remote deployment, and the word remote deployment often causes some confusion because it means it's remote to the Cloud Buildbased, and that means that you can deploy that on-premise, which for customers can be a little bit confusing to call it remote if you're putting it in the corner of your warehouse, but it means that you can deploy it on another cloud if you wish, or anywhere else that you wanted to deploy it. So there are a couple of different flavors of remote. I'm not going to go into those today, but the standard way of deploying it is with a Windows VM management, and that's what we've been doing since March, and we've got quite a lot of customers already on that pre-packaged image version. I'll cover a little bit of how that works in line with the Buildbased in a moment. But first, the cloud service. And so when you buy IFS Cloud, the products from the cloud service, it's all contained in one platform, which means the cloud build place and the use place are all under the IFS Cloud Service umbrella. And the IFS Cloud experience is supported by the Lifecycle Experience Portal, and the Lifecycle Experience services, including the cloud build place, are covered with no extra charge to the customer whenever you buy the IFS Cloud application. So you, the customer, simply connect to the cloud build place or to the application in the use place in exactly the same way. When it comes to remote, the cloud build place is still in the IFS Cloud service. So regardless of how you choose to deploy the use place, that's where your runtime environments are, the build place always resides in cloud service. And the cloud build place is where we manage source code deliveries and where we prepare and allow you to download the necessary installation components for the prepackaged Linux image for the configured Kubernetes cluster. You do this through the cloud build place, and then you can deploy them remotely into your use place as you wish. So I mentioned the build place a few times already. Well, what is a build place? And what I realized as I moved outside of the sort of walls of IFS is that not everybody outside of IFS knows what a build place is. So it's important to say that a cloud build place is a new offering, but build place is not a new concept for IFS. So since the beginning of time, build place is the name we gave to IFS, where we merge code from IFS core with any customer modifications and any updates and prepare deliveries. So in the older releases of IFS, that was primarily hidden behind the curtain of IFS, and customers were not really aware of that. Under certain conditions, partners were able to get into that area for creating extensions and modifications, but primarily it's the work of IFS. And IFS would take care of merging those IFS core source codes in customer modifications in order to prepare deliveries for the customer. So this gave us a few problems. One, we have more and more partners who want to work inside the IFS Cloud build place area. And two, it didn't really give customers the control they wanted on accessing the modifications. Also, this way of delivering code relied on IFS preparing single builds for every single customer. And so the introduction of the cloud build place is a revolution in how IFS is deploying code for customers, including something called install all, which I'll come to later, which means that we don't need to create individual patches any longer for customers. So what's important to know is the IFS Cloud Build Place is the only way to deploy IFS Cloud. It runs, for those who know the old build places, we used to use something called Harvest. In the new build place, we use Git code management, which is a state-of-the-art way to manage code versioning. It's where you get any updates and new releases of software from IFS. It's where you can add customizations, and you can do unit testing in this environment before you create deliveries to move to your use place. So it's a pretty important part of the infrastructure of your cloud IFS Cloud product. So just at an overview level, the cloud build place itself contains the repositories, the master repository and a repository for your customer solution, which contains any modifications that you've made. It's where you access service updates and release feature release content, which comes out twice a year. And as I said, those Git repositories are a key part of that product. Developer work is still done in a workstation, but the skills for developers are slightly different because we need to have experience of Git, and for those who are coming from IFS of old, that's something that we need to build up. In addition to that, inside the build place, you can spin up temporary environments. So there are these ad hoc environments which you do on demand. They're really useful for creating testing code. They're not designed for having customer data or for testing customization. And there is ways to get data in there, but they are short-lived environments that are spun up and then removed over time. So I mentioned the Lifecycle Experience Portal. It is your gateway to the Cloud Build Place, and Lifecycle Experience is a bigger program that will run for the next few years that contains more functionality that we will bring into that process. But for now, the first key deliverable there is the Customer Cloud Buildbased, and the access to that is through the Lifecycle Experience portal. So as a new IFS customer, you will get a welcome email, which will give you access to the Lifecycle Experience portal. And from there, whoever is your portal administrator will be able to grant access to everyone else that you need. And that's a key change as well, because it means that you as the customer are in charge of that Buildbased, and you give access to that Buildbased for whoever you want to go in there. And that would include IFS as well. If you wanted IFS to access your Buildbased, you would need to grant them access. So this big change of moving from IFS Cloud, if you like, the Buildbased coming from behind the curtain, it really puts the customer in charge of the Buildbased rather than IFS. So you are now in control of that Buildbased. And of course, that's quite a significant change from where we were before, where all the updates were prepared by IFS. But it's an important change to the market, and a lot of our customers are already asking for this kind of change, that they can keep control of those updates and when they're coming from IFS. It allows us to fit with the new software cadence. So we've got an acceleration of software change with the new release cadence coming twice a year, so 2 feature releases per year, and the end of single patching. So we are no longer providing single patching into objects like we did for apps 10, and we only provide service updates, and this makes much more sense for the way we are working with the cloud product. I mentioned the install all, so this is another key change, and it means that every customer has the same build. Yeah, so this means that we have no patching to do individually, and if we needed to release something urgent to all customers, we can release that and test it on the same build because all customers have the same build. We still have something called the solution set, which limits functionality for products modules that you didn't buy within that build, but the actual installation of the code is the same for every single customer. And the last, a really important part I mentioned already, is that it's a pull process for customers now. So if you want to pull a service update into your environment, you pull that without any intervention from IFS. So it's not something that you must wait or contact consulting or support to do. If you want to get the latest service update, you can simply pull it into your Buildbased yourself. You don't need any interaction with IFS. So let's just look for a minute on what's different. So I think it's important to say that the job of merging fixes and updates and hot fixes was work that was done by support before, and that work isn't done anymore because we don't have individual patches and merges. So it's not that work has it's just gone away with the way we've designed the delivery of the software. So customization support was what used to exist on the older versions, where you could have your customization support provided by IFS for a fixed fee per year, and this would allow the customization to be uplifted when any software updates came. But it only covered updates within the same release. So if you were on apps 9, it covered the updates within that release. It didn't cover upgrades, if you like, moving from apps 9 to 10. Once we prepared that delivery from support, we would pass that over to the customer for deployment into your use place environments. So when we look in the new world, obviously that middle section has gone because there is no modification. And the big change here is that the work which needs to be done if you have modifications which need to be uplifted at a software update is inside acting on behalf of the customer in the Customer Cloud Buildbased. There is still an offering from the organization, from the success organization, to cover that work if you want to have someone help you with that work, and that's called Modification Support Service, and you can get support from IFS if you want them to take care of that for you. But it's on a different model than we used to have in the old world. So why is it important for you, the customer? Well, I mentioned already that you own the Buildbased, so that's a really important part, and you decide when updates come. You're also empowered to grant and revoke any technician you want. So that can be your own employees, it can be partners, it could be IFS, but you decide who gets access to your Buildbased and when. It's provided at no extra cost from IFS, so we cover the cost of the Buildbased as it's the only way to deploy the IFS Cloud product. So this is something that a lot of customers are asking for. We're providing the framework, the guidance, and the tools to enable you to move on in a faster way with your customer success products and with your partners. So I mentioned that the Buildbased comes free of charge. It is to a certain scale. Okay, so the Buildbased comes with the repositories and with 2 environments included at no extra cost. It comes with 15 developers included at no extra cost. If you need more than this, if you need more temporary environments inside the Buildbased, or you need more than 15 developers, you can order these from your account manager, and they're available on the GPL. These are things which can be ordered if you need them. Okay, they are annual subscriptions, so if you want to order extra environments, you can order those for a project if you wish, or extra users, and then you can crank it down to the standard again after your project. So let's talk a little bit about the different environments. So I mentioned the Buildbased and the environments that exist inside the Buildbased. And the different environments, the other place is the use place. Yeah? So build is where we do the preparation of code and modifications, and the use place is where you do the configuration, the testing, and running of your environment in a productive state. And if you're using the cloud service, we provide 3 environments for you in the use place by standard. One called configuration, one called test, and one called production. Those 3 environments we envisage that you will use for configuration, testing, and in the productive use. Of course, you can use them as you want. We can't really dictate that, but that's how we've envisaged it set up. So what's really important here is we talk about the difference between configuration and customization. So customization in the world of IFS is programming work. It's things that are done using code and where things need to be compiled into the core product. This work is typically done by technicians and typically done in the cloud Buildbased. The configuration work, this is parameter settings, and these can be quite significant in the way they change business logic. You can still do configuration about UXs, mouse clicks, actions. All of this stuff is configuration and can be done in the use place. Typically in the CFG environment, the first environment inside the use place. That work isn't done in the Buildbased, it's done in the use place, and that's an important distinction to know. So the concept behind the Buildbased says it's all about code. Once the code is complete, we move the delivery into the configuration environment, and by there we can test it. Another important thing I mentioned about the cloud Buildbased, it doesn't contain the test data of the customer environment. So in terms of the environment, the Buildbased only contains scripted test data. So the test data there is, let's say, quite noddy, and you can't take copies of productive data and put them into these environments in the customer cloud Buildbased. The use place can have copies of production data, so you can have copies into the configuration, test, or prod, and that data can be used to test things at a higher level. So this slide's a bit ugly, and I apologize in advance for it not looking better. I can't think of a better way to organize it, but I drew the same picture down the middle. These are the Buildbased environments, and then these are the 3 use place environments, and these are the types of things we used to do in projects and where we would envisage that you do them now. Yeah? So the customization development is done in the Buildbased, modifications unit testing is done in the Buildbased, preparation updates, update of preparations, language installations is all done through the Buildbased now. But once you come to the prepare a delivery and move it, then you're into the use place environments. And so configuration, prototype, solution acceptance testing, this is all done in the use place between the configuration and test environments. Like I said, these are the names of the environments if you use cloud service. If you decide to go remote and do your own environments, of course, you can name them whatever you want, and you can have as many as you want. Yeah, so if you've got different environments, you might have a different one for migration or pre-production or whatever you want to call it. However you organize your product and your testing, it's really up to you how you do that. So let's talk about moving to the cloud. So if you're already an IFS customer and you're on one of the former apps versions, it's important to know how you're going to transition. So there are 2 key ways: an upgrade in place or a re-implementation. And the factors which you need to consider when you're deciding which way to move are really how many releases have you got to jump. So if you're going from apps 10 into IFS Cloud, then it's a straightforward transition process. If you're making multi-jumps, so you're going from say 7, and you've got to go all the way to IFS Cloud, that's a more difficult transition for you. the level of customization that you plan to retain. So we talked about customization, level of programming modifications that you've got in the old. And typically, we see that reduced quite significantly from the older apps versions, where there are normally more than 100 modifications, down to apps 10, where there are normally less than 50, down to IFS Cloud, where so far there are normally less than 10. So we're seeing quite a significant change in the way that modifications are done. I'll talk a little bit more about tailoring later. But those two important ways of moving here, so upgrade or re-implementation. Also consider how well the current processes are meeting the target, how much data you've got to move. If you do a re-implementation, you can only take over cutover balances. If you need historical data, then you need to really consider the upgrade in place. So upgrade in place comes with two key steps, the build, place, move, and the use, place, move. So the build, place, move is about the modifications you've done. Each of those can be lifted and shifted into the new build place. But of course, it should be the objective here to reduce the modifications. As we move into the latest and greatest IFS product, you shouldn't need all of those modifications you had in your older legacy version. There's still the database upgrade to do, and this is done in the production in a copy of the production environment, where you take the scripts and run these to get the database updated. There's a full methodology provided from IFS on how this should be done. I'm not going to cover into that today. So I mentioned about upgrade paths. You can make one step jump, but not for more than 3 versions of IFS. So if you're on 8, you still can jump directly to IFS Cloud, but if you're on an earlier version than 8, then you need to make a stepping stone. And the recommendation is that you do the longest jump first. So if you're on 7, you should jump to 10 first, and then you jump from 10 to cloud. So re-implementations, sometimes it makes sense. It depends on your situation and maybe what data you've got in your old environment and whether you want to retain that data or not. If you do want to make a transition this way, it's equally possible for you to do that. You just need to extract the data yourself, do any transformation and cleaning you want, and then re-upload the data into your new use place. Equally, the build place transition is the same. You can move things across as you need. There is a tool from IFS called the Smart Data Manager, or you can use other third-party tools for that sort of ETL process. So I talked a little bit about modifications, and one of the key reasons for keeping to the latest version of IFS is about trying to remove the kind of cost of those modifications over time. And typically, we are seeing customers reduce the number of modifications within IFS as we move to the later versions. So we talk about the IFS Cloud being evergreen. And what does that really mean? Well, evergreen is a term in the software industry that talks about software that's kept up to date automatically. But from an IFS point of view, that doesn't really make sense when you're talking about ERP, because there are complex business processes here, and we can't automatically update that. So there's no push of IFS product into your environments. It's all about pull. But you need to decide from your organization what makes sense to you and how you will take the new release cadence of IFS Cloud and sit that in with your organization. So the release cadence of IFS Cloud falls into 2 things. We have feature releases, which are coming twice a year, and these are delivering all severity fixes along with new functionality. So one is in spring, R1, and one is in autumn or the fall, which is called R2. They're called the same thing each year. So it's 21 R1, 21 R2, and then next year it'll be 22 R1. In between that, we bring the service updates. So we're currently providing service updates for 21 R1, and we will, of course, in due course, be providing a service update for 21 R2. But those service updates are containing only severity fixes, high severity things that need to be put into the application. They're tested against the core and then released through the Lifecycle Experience portal. So customers can spin up a temporary environment, they can test it there, and I'll cover a little bit more about that process of how we bring those updates in a moment. But what's important is that you decide a strategy of keeping up to date with the service updates. And as I've discussed with customers who are in project at the minute, it makes sense if you're in project to try and keep up to date. Once you go into a productive state, and we need to think about, how we do that regression test, because even though it only contains fixes. Of course, a regression test is needed before you hit production environment. So I talked about tailoring, customization, and I think it's important to say that there's a lot of change in IFS about the way we advise and help customers make the modifications they need to their environments so that we can help you keep evergreen and so that you don't have to do what's called bad tailoring. There are good ways to modify and there are bad ways to modify. What we're trying to do is to lower the impact of the update whilst maximizing the business value where you've got a key bit of functionality that you need. So of course, not all modifications are about functionality. Integrations, of course, are considered as modifications as well. But really, I'm focusing now on the things that are to do with the way you want to tailor the application to work in a slightly different way. I've been working in ERP implementations for nearly 30 years now, and every CIO announces they want a vanilla environment out of the box because they know it makes sense from an adoption point of view in the longer term. As soon as the discussion goes down a level into the organization, every functional owner thinks that their process is special. And what we just need to be careful about before we venture into customization, before we start the programming route, is whether this process is really commodity and creates a competitive, or it can create an advantage for us competitively. We want to keep those modifications to the core, to a minimum, to avoid that problem of support burden every time we need to take an update. So it's important that you decide when to customize and when to tailor. And there's some really, really good documentation. I've got some links at the end that take you to the tailoring guide within IFS and really can help you to make those right decisions. It's important that you take responsibility for this now because the tailoring and the capability are outside of the control of IFS. So you can do whatever you want with a partner or yourself, and IFS, we don't know about it necessarily. So I mentioned this already. Things you can do in modifications is all about programming in the customization world. Configuration, there's a lot you can do here to do with look and feel, appearance, navigation, lobbies. All of this is considered as configuration. Yeah, that's not programming and gives an easier path for upgrading. So not all tailoring is bad. We just need to make sure that we tailor in the right way and make sure that the modification is done in a sensible way. Sometimes configurations can get so complicated that it might be simpler to do a customization that's simple rather than a really complex configuration change. So we need to just be mindful of that as well. So I mentioned about the update process. So this is a real revolution for the way we bring change to customers. And this is how it works in the cloud product, through the cloud build place. So in the cloud build place, you have access to the master repository. That's the line at the top. And you can see the two repositories, the custom repository and the master repository inside the cloud build place. They're both Azure repositories. And what we can do is create a special branch in there, which separates it from the main code line. We can pull in that new update from IFS. There we can test it. We can do any uplift against scrums that are there. And when we are satisfied with that, we can merge it back into the main branch. So during that period where it's in its own topic branch, we can only see it in that one environment that's spun up on that branch. We don't see it in the main code line. And that means that we can still do any other work that needs to be done in the main code line. So it's a nice, simple process. We've got many customers who have gone through the process of service update in R1 through the last 6 months or so. And of course, we are continuing that now as we move into R2. So our service updates will be available for R2 very shortly. So the release process, I mentioned these are coming twice a year. And what we've introduced in R2 in order to manage this release process is the Release Studio. And this allows customers to take advantage of a process way of bringing the release in and keeping it separated from their core code work. So it's slightly more complicated than a service update because it creates a new workspace within the cloud build place specifically around the release. But what we've done here is to bring it into a sort of flow, workflow process that you can go through in order to make sure that you have a capability of doing this with again, the minimum impact to your business. It's not, taking a release within the release studio is not like moving from apps 9 to apps 10. It's a revolution. For those that have done it before in the old world, all of the service update and release update process are managed through deliveries. There's no scripts on the database to run afterwards. It's a revolution in the way we implement change into our environments. So once you're finished with the release process, you do the completion phase, and the completion phase effectively moves the custom repository up to the level of R2, and then you are then effectively landed on a standard R2 customer, and you can start taking updates in the future on that new R2 master branch. So it's a straightforward process. I'm not going to go into it too much today, but the trigger of that process is through the Lifecycle Experience portal. And if there's a release available for your environment, you will see the release available button underneath each of the build places. Once you press that, it starts to flow off with IFS. So Nalin is with me for the Q&A. He will take any of your questions about the release studio and how it works. Like I said, it's a step-by-step approach, which is designed to walk you through that in a structured and organized way. And so we launched that at R2, and we've had nearly 20 customers now go through the release process from R1 to R2. So we're pretty confident of how that's working, and we're delighted with the progress that we've made with that so far. So you want to find out more about what I've said today. There's some links here, so the presentation will be shared, but really want to just bring your awareness to a few things that are really important. Yeah? So content around Academy is really, really useful for customers who are moving into CRIM development, because it is different. If you've got experienced developers of apps 10, they need to get educated on how to work with the Git repositories, because otherwise you're going to find it a really difficult transition. The documentation exists in docs.ifs.com, and the documentation is really different than you've had from IFS before, and really would encourage you to take some time to look at that. So I mentioned about the documentation. It should be your first port of call whenever you're trying to get any help from IFS. It is really different than the quality of documentation we used to have before. From a functional point of view, it goes from end to end using the process flows. And from a technical point of view, there are really good step-by-step guides. And from my own experience of the Lifecycle Experience section, it's fantastic documentation that really describes what must be done at each step in order to be successful. So please take a look at it. I know that historically there's been some quality problems with the documentation from IFS, but this is a step change. Yeah, the cloud product is new, and the documentation is a new level. So if you don't find what you need and you still need support, the support portal is the place to go. So the support portal sits alongside the Lifecycle Experience portal, and this is the way you access anything you need from support. So whether if you're a cloud customer and it's environmental based, or if you're a remote customer and you want to raise a problem that you're having with a functional issue, you can do it here. So it's support.ifs.com, and there is no access in the LCS, the old version that we used to use. Everybody from IFS Cloud is in the new support portal. So once you come into this environment, you are switched over to using the new experience. So you can raise your cases here. Please do put business impact. There isn't a special field for business impact. So when you get to your description, please put in there, what impact it's having for your project. We know most people aren't live yet with IFS Cloud, but it's important there's a good business impact defined. Is someone available to be our contact? And we will make sure we get support. The IFS Cloud product is a new product, and customers, we are expecting you to be contacting us. So don't struggle through things with the project. If you feel like something's not working, please contact us. We will find a solution for you. I couldn't go through this presentation because Phil would beat me if I didn't mention the community. So, the community is a really useful place for any how-to questions. All of the release and service update content is in there. So if you want to know what's coming in the service updates, this is the place where you find it. The release notes are published there just before they come out. So it's a really, really useful place. And of course, you can exchange questions and ideas with other customers, partners, whoever you want. If you put a question in there, we will, from IFS, we will make sure that you get an answer. So I just want to go through a few bits of key terminology that I've said today, just to be clear. Apps X, we use to refer to any legacy apps version. Yeah, IFS Cloud is all of the cloud product releases, so R1, R2 for 21, and of course, as we move into next year. The two different types of upgrade in scripts, scripted or re-implementation. And then once we move into IFS Cloud, into the IFS Cloud track, there aren't any more upgrades. Yeah, we talk about updates because it is a really different process and a really different way of taking change. So as you move from 21R1 to 21R2, that's an update, and so that's a release update, the major feature releases, and then the service update is what we do for these fixes that are coming every month. I mentioned the Release Update Studio. This is a special workspace which allows you to structure that release process in order to get the updates for the IFS Cloud product. So with that, I'm going to say thank you for listening, and we're going to start the Q&A.
That's great, Tony. Thank you very much. We have some questions for you, and Naleen.
I should hope so.
There you go. There you are. Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so is it possible to host the Buildbased on customer's cloud or a partner's cloud?
It's not possible to host the Buildbased anywhere else. As I mentioned, however you deploy the IFS Cloud product, the IFS Cloud Buildbased always sits with cloud service.
Thank you. It seems a lot of people are calling what you call a customization a modification, source code modification. Also, a lot of people are calling what you call a configuration a customization. What is correct? It does cause some confusion with customers and consultants alike.
Yeah, it does. And a modification is, for me, the same as customization. So, we can accept either of those words to describe it. And of course, integrations I mentioned already are also, modifications of a type. So we don't have to say you shouldn't use that word. We can use all those words to describe the same things as long as we understand what it's talking about. But to be clear, modification or customization or integration are all coding based, so they're all build place activities. And configuration, that's in the use place.
Thank you. Configurations, etc., are done on the use place, ? Is it possible to have my configurations also stored on the Git repository in Buildbased, or should I plan for my own version management system for the configurations made in use place?
It's recommended in the documentation that you store your configurations in the Git repository.
Which legacy versions of IFS are supported to upgrade using the technical upgrade? How stable are these upgrade scripts?
So I think we have upgrade scripts from 7 through to 10. As mentioned, there are some limitations if you run the really earlier versions that you have to do a stop off at 10 first. And I would say those scripts are well versed by now, yeah. So we are running through them regularly. So we have taken a lot of customers from 7 to 10, and we've taken a lot of customers from 9 and 10 straight to 12, straight to cloud.
Thank you. Is it still true to say you can evergreen from apps 10 update 6 Oracle 19c?
So evergreen isn't about a version. Okay, it's about an ethos. So I showed the evergreens like a scale. Yeah, so as long as you are on an up-to-date version and you've got a strategy for keeping yourself up to date in the future, you can class yourself as evergreen. Okay, it's not about being on a certain version, and certainly not a certain version of Oracle. Okay, it's about having a systematic approach to keeping your systems up to date.
Thank you. How is the delivery supplied from build place to the use place in remote installation?
Naleen, you're on.
Yeah, if it is a cloud implementation, of course it is automated. But if it's a remote installation, customers can download all the artifacts. There is a separate functionality provided within the build place, so they can download all the artifacts and install in the remote environments or the use places.
Thank you. Is it possible to still use Buildbased to do customizations while in the release update?
Sorry, Phil, you're breaking up a little bit.
Is it possible to still use Buildbased to do customizations while in the middle of a release update?
Yes, that is possible. That is the whole idea of the release update also. The customers can use the Buildbased to do their existing customization while the release update is going on. Once the release update is completed, they can continue on the latest version, but it is possible.
Thank you. This is not directly related to what was discussed today. What will be the support work, product work, support, role activities in cloud, since this is direct R&D to customer partner process?
Well, I think you've got someone playing Xbox in your house. I can't. Your voice is breaking up. Could you say it again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
This is not directly related to what was discussed today. What will be the support work, product support, role activities in cloud, since this is direct R&D to customer partner process?
So support won't do any single patching anymore. So support won't be taking care of applying customer fixes into customer environments, because that work doesn't exist anymore. But there is, let me assure you, from the IFS Cloud product so far, we have a very busy support team that are working with customers. We find solutions that exist, and also we are not providing the fixes as such by code, but there are plenty of other ways to provide fixes. And also we are working in partnership with R&D on fixes that come through the service update channel.
This is a question for me. How can we access this presentation recording? You will be able to link to the recording from the IFS community when we've loaded it up. Tony, I'm not sure, are you going to make the presentation available as a document for people? You don't know yet? Okay.
Of course I am.
Next question. Is the customer in control of database copies, aka clones, inside the use place? Can data sets be copied from the build place to the use place or vice versa?
So let's be clear. Not everything is the same if you're in cloud service as if you're on remote. Okay, but in terms of copying data, you are forbidden to put customer data copies directly into the cloud build place. Yeah, the data in there is not to be copied to and from by the customer. However, in the use place, of course, you can copy data around wherever you want, even in cloud service, but you must make a request via ServiceNow for the cloud service guys to make those copies for you.
Thank you. Is it planned to include PSO and or FSM into the build place?
Yes, that is in the roadmap. We are planning to include those modules also into the cloud build place.
Nalin, I don't think we will include FSM, yeah?
The PSO, yes.
PSO.
The PSO part, sorry.
Not
PSO.
FSM.
Yes, correct. Sorry about it.
Last question currently showing, if a customer bought IFS Cloud and PSO but deploys IFS Cloud as remote, can the customer get a PSO dev environment through Buildbased?
Not currently in the build place, yeah? Because the PSO is currently not in the build place. So what we've done with customers that have bought PSO alongside IFS, currently we are deploying IFS like we always PSO like we always have, and so the dev environment for PSO is sent like it always was. In the future, that will change. So as we go into next year, we'll be working with PSO in a more integrated way within IFS Cloud.
That was the last question. If anybody has any more questions, shout up now. No? Okay. We'll use this opportunity to thank Tony and Nalin for a wonderful presentation. That was great. Thank you ever so much. I'd like to thank everybody for joining today. It's been a really great turnout, and I hope it's been informative for you. Look out for our... Oh, sorry.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah. Look out for our first January webinar on the 13th with Chamaka, who will be discussing how to identify performance degrades from a database. If you have any suggestions or topics that you would like to see presented, please do reach out to me directly. And we're having some thank yous and cheers in the comments as well.
Smashed it.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank
See
you
you
very
later.
much, everybody. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.